Hey, everybody, and welcome to Improv FAQ at Length. This is a series of longer conversations about improv topics that have lots of questions surrounding them. And I'm James Quesada.
I'm Bob Wick.
Caught you off guard. We've never done that before.
We have never done that before.
We should, though.
I don't mind it. I don't mind. I was going in for the dramatic pause. That's it. And I'm Bob Wick.
Yeah. But that's who we are. And more often than not, we've been having a guest. But on the episodes where we don't have guests, Bob and I make our way through a list of suggested questions from a group of friends of ours, and we answer those. So we're going to keep making our way through that list. And our question for this episode, the one we're going to start with and see how long we can take with it, and we will have other questions on deck. We're going to start with Ainsley's question. Our friend Ainsley.
Ainsley!
Suggested that the question of advice for what to do when you have an established character and the character needs to turn or have a change of heart or mind. How do you time the change and justify it gracefully so it doesn't feel like a shock to the audience or a betrayal of established reality? And that's a great question.
That is a really good question. And I think that's something that people struggle with. What do you think?
Well, you know, we've touched on it a little bit in a couple other episodes. I want to say that we touched on it in the acting episode, maybe in the character episode about, and like narrative. And basically, I think that what the problem is, or the tricky thing about it, is that you want to stick to your guns and keep things simple to what you've established, and true to what you've established. And I think in instances where you're nearing the end of like a scene arc, or if you're working in narrative and you have a show arc, you know, all good stories are going to involve a character having a change in their actions or beliefs.
Well, ideally, like especially if you're playing like a high status character, they should learn something and almost lose status.
That's right. They should learn.
I learned something about myself today type situation.
So I just want to kind of set up the problem of it, or the challenge of it being that, like, we train ourselves to be consistent and lock into a character or a truth and play that truth. And so this is a really great question for, like, well, what happens when you need to evolve or learn something as a character?
Yeah, well, maybe the question is, why do you need to change it? You know, what is going on? And it could be something as simple as, well, it's a 45-minute show and we haven't done that character status shift yet. And it needs to happen for it to have a satisfying conclusion if you're telling like a long narrative story.
Yeah.
If that's the case, I guess you can switch, but you have to like maybe also imply a justification as to why. If the character learned something that we didn't have time to show on stage, or I don't know, something, or have like an emotional reason for it. Like, oh, I realized I love the other character, therefore I should be treating that character better. So I'm dropping my status, elevating their status because, you know, love has a way of doing that kind of stuff. You know,
it could also be So I think those are examples of when change is good for a character and makes sense for storytelling. There's also the instances that I know you've also pointed out in other episodes, Bob, where you're like, you're just trying to cooperate with the other players on stage, and you're like, you made this choice and you're yes-anding things, and then your scene partner is like, I think the situation you gave was like, Open the door. I don't want to open the door. Open the door. I don't want to open the door. Okay. Well, you asked me 3 times. I guess I'll open the door. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
something that just doesn't match with your character game or wants in the scene. And you have to break that to cooperate sometimes with your scene partner to not feel like a stubborn jerk.
when there's unnecessary push pull that's not part of the story or even a game in the scene. It's just 2 clashing point of views.
Yeah.
But that's when you have like sentences like, I don't usually do this, but because I love you is a really good one.
Yeah.
So in those instances, it's like, well, I mean, take yourself as a human being. Like, you do stuff that you wouldn't normally do because you care about the other character, or, you know, in real life, they're not characters, they're your friends. I don't like roller coasters, but since all my friends are going to Cedar Point, I guess I'm going on a roller coaster today. You know?
Yeah. I love that. Again, I love those little tools that can just help you navigate and transition and reaffirm or find your way to the things that are needed in a scene. Set up lines, and what you just said, I don't usually do this, but and give it a justification I think that's a really great tool. Can also probably lead to some funny discoveries or just like character truths that can be used and built on throughout the scene of the show. I guess my thing that I'll offer is just to express in your nonverbals the conflict in the change. If it's more of like that narrative thing, or like just it's the end of a conflict driven scene and it just feels like that's the button is going to be to have one character come around to a different point of view. When people make decisions that are difficult or change their minds about something, you can see it on their faces in real life. And so if you just kind of milk the nonverbal of like, okay, you know what I mean? Like just give
I
it.
like that. Yeah. and the longer you do it, the funnier it'll become, because this is like, have you ever seen the movie Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
Oh, the movie version? Yeah.
Yeah. So
oh, God, yeah.
Paul Rubin is a vampire. He's kind of like an antagonist during the whole thing. He's not the main guy, but he's kind of an asshole.
Yeah.
And he's a vampire. And at the end, he gets killed. And he gets killed like towards the end of the movie, and you don't really think about it. And then it cuts back after, like during the credits, and he goes for it. He is dying at a 10. And for a long amount, at first it's funny, and then it stops being funny, and then it gets hilarious. It goes on and on.
Dude,
and on.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Because he's got the wooden stake in him, and he's like,
right, ooh,
yeah, totally.
Kicking the wall.
I think I think that's a great idea. So those are probably 2 really good options to keep in your back pocket. Is one, a nice transitional sentence that has a justification built into it, and secondly, to just milk the game of the nonverbal,
the internal conflict
change, the internal conflict. Totally. Yeah.
If I want to offer one thing though, one more thing.
Yeah.
I honestly believe your character, if you establish a strong character and your want and your point of view is very strong, and it should be clear for the other performers. So I almost feel like it's their responsibility to teach that character something, if that's the point. You know, if your point of view has to change, something external has to happen. You know, and that's usually when your mood or feelings or your point of view does switch in real life. For example, James, if you were waiting for me, you know, for lunch, and I'm always late, and today I'm like 40 minutes late, you would be pissed because I'm really late and I'm always late, and it sucks, and it's annoying to have a friend who's always late. But if you're sitting in that restaurant and I call you up like, man, I just got into a car accident, you are no longer pissed at me because now you learn new information that was given to you externally, you become concerned, like, oh my God, my friend's hurt. You might even feel a little bit guilty because, oh, I was so mad at him. I didn't know. So like it's up to your fellow performers, because if you feel like your character has to change, then it's probably the right time in the story, but it's not necessarily your responsibility to change your character.
Yeah. It's one of those things where like the go-to line of acting is reacting or support your partner. There's kind of a I don't know if it's a paradox or what in that, which is that like, well, in order to react, there's got to be something to react to.
Right.
And in order to support your partner's got to be doing something to support.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a two-way street, and maybe it's a great piece of advice on the flip side of the question, which is that if you're trying to get someone to change or drive the scene forward, you can also offer a reason to change, and that can be the justification.
Right.
So being able to feed the arc of a scene and the acting reacting loop from both sides is absolutely a great thing to point out. Did you have any other things to?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. Yeah. Because
Okay, well then we will go to our next question on the list.
Next question, let's go.
So Kurt asks, what are the most memorable notes you have received, and how did they impact your performance style?
The first one, because I think it's like one of the ones that kind of changed the way I performed. It was from Nancy Edwards, or Nancy Hayden at the time, because she got married. That's how last names work. Was don't go for the laugh so much. Sometimes and go for the awe moment, or appreciate. Or I think her words were appreciate the awe moments, because if you can create a character in a short amount of time that makes the audience go ah, it's a lot harder, and it's so satisfying, because basically our job as improvisers is to manipulate the audience. Their emotions. You're trying to entertain. That's a manipulation of emotion. Because theoretically, person comes in, buys a ticket. Audience member comes in, buys random person comes in, buys a ticket, sits down, and they're kind of neutral, but they're hoping for something. So if you're entertaining them, that's manipulation, and you're giving them what they hope for. Most people don't walk into a comedy show expecting to feel something more than, happiness or laughter. But to make them go, ah, is really cool. And also, if you can get that from an audience member, you get, you earn their trust, so you can do a lot more in front of them. Yeah. Because they you're endearing as a performer to them, because you made them feel something they didn't expect to feel.
Yeah,
so the awe moment.
I feel like you're good at that too. I feel like I've seen you do those quick turns, especially you play a fair amount of brash or blunt characters, but sometimes you'll pull out that softer side and be like, I don't know who I would be without you, and then people are like,
those.
Like, oh, yeah, that really is nice. It's a nice extra dimension to what we can do with improv, and I always like things that keep it dynamic and surprising for the audience, and that's a nice unexpected thing for an audience member to get from an improv show.
Yeah, definitely.
Speaking of extra dimensions, the one that came to mind for me is when Dan Izzo put together a group of improvisers for a show called The Cowards, and Dan had taken a break from directing improv for a little while, and he came back to just work on a show, and man, it was just at the right timing for me where I was feeling like restless and doing so much. And it was in that period where I was really working on my mission statement of like, do things a cartoon can do on stage. And we were in rehearsal, and Dan has this really uncanny ability to just like point and give you a note that just hits you to the core or rings true for you or opens
that's his
you up.
superpower.
Yeah. But I can't remember exactly what the scene was. I think I was like on the back of a truck and on a stripper pole or something. And after the scene was done, he was like, James, you're like a 3-dimensional representation of a 4-dimensional object. And that really inspired me, the fact that he phrased it that way. And that's a tesseract, is the 3-dimensional representation of a 4-dimensional object. And that really, not immediately, because we were working on this show that was kind of annoyance style, and it's Dan's style, but like it's a lot of that just unbridled energy that we were working on. And so it didn't really come into play for me immediately after that point, but it stuck with me for so long, and it made me want to work on more shows, and it developed my philosophy of what I want out of my own improv and out of the improv shows that I work on and develop, and things like the Elastic Time Canon, and it made me remember things like working on Laughter House 5 in that nonlinear time thing, and want to do things with troops like Presto Change or Javelin that were more organic, transformative, and surreal.
Cool. Okay. I hear the note, but I guess the follow-up question is, what exactly did the note mean to you? Yeah. Like what click? What switch did it click in your head? Like what exactly? So like if you had to give that note to me, what would that mean? Or somebody else,
Well, okay, so it's kind of this might be a non-answer, but we were saying that like Dan will give you the note that you need that feels very personal, and so I guess it's not that it like gave me any instruction, but I guess, and then the short answer on it is that like it led me to my current belief right now that I think that the theater experiences that I want to create and be a part of are the kinds of experiences that have the same positive side effects as mind-expanding drugs, psychedelic, mind-opening experiences. And it just kind of like phrased in a different way for me, this idea of what it means to be cartoony and like why. It just made me want to get excited to find more ways to do that. Because it just felt like, wow, a tesseract, or like conceptualizing the 4th dimension. That is like the mission in my mind of what we're doing with improv.
Okay. That's so cool.
Yeah.
I never heard that story before. That's wild.
Yeah,
I love it. It does make sense though. Like that's you in a nutshell, but for someone to be able to sum that up in a sentence, holy shit, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay. Like I like how you mentioned not all notes are instructional, or not all are theory and stuff like that. It makes me think of, me and you have been teaching for a while now and coaching and stuff like that. And every once in a while, I don't know why this phrase happened, but the theory that there's a hard note, like, because both the notes we mentioned weren't hard, they're just good. So I wish people would use that phrasing. Like, can you just give me a note? But I think there's some, I don't know, connection with like a military boot camp type, instruction, like,
like
suck it in, soldier.
Yeah, tough love, like, yeah.
So I think with that theory, like, don't ask for the hard note. Try to ask for a good note, and then also take the notes you're given.
Yeah.
I think that was a hard one for me. Like, I think for a lot of improvisers when they first got started, you're learning the art, but you also, because it's under comedy, I think people don't respect comedy enough. Because everybody has moments in their life when they're funny, or you a lot of people who are not trained can make people laugh, but there's a difference between being the funny guy at work and then being an entertaining person on stage, and realizing that is something interesting.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, just the note that I relate to when I was coming up was I was the funny guy at work, and then I had actually several teachers like kind of help me ring it in. And the overall note was, play to the height of your intelligence. You can talk about dirty things, or, you can go blue, but don't go blue for the shock value. Go blue and say something interesting about a subject that we're familiar with, and phrase it interesting.
Yeah. Are there any like aha moments maybe that didn't come directly from a note or a teacher, but that like you discovered either for yourself or in your development that are along these lines of having a big impact on your style and philosophy?
You know what? I can't really put my finger on it. But you know what? There is a good story though. So I took a workshop with TJ Advertowski. That's TJ Advertowski. Yeah, TJ. Oh man, you know what? The overall arc of me fucking up names during this podcast is I want to do a supercut because I do not do names well, and I feel horrible every time. And I've tried all those techniques. But anyways, back to the story. So TJ from TJ Dave comes to Detroit, and he's teaching a workshop. And it was right after, I discovered, or I think, or we discovered that Trust This Is All Made Up exists, or maybe it just got onto Netflix, or I forgot how, but it was like a big deal to me. Other than he's an incredible improviser, and this is like the second time I'm going to see him in my life. Super excited. There's a workshop. Take the workshop. But it's Diff. And, since Detroit is the host of Diff, I feel like I'm part of that. Like I think Detroit has a great reputation of being great hosts, and I never want to like tarnish that reputation.
Yeah. So
we're in class. And I'm not being very active. I'm active, but I'm not like the first one up like I would usually be. Or I'm trying to be polite, like a polite guest or a host. But we're taking this workshop. It's absolutely amazing. He's got he's just so incredible just to listen to him talk, philosophy. And we get to the end, and, we're all sitting in this I think it's like a yoga room. So there wasn't any chairs. We're all sitting on the floor, like hardwood floor. And he looks at his watch and he's like, oh, well, hey, we're actually ahead of time. Let's do one more exercise. Can I get 2 up? And because I've been patient, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go up first this time. So me and Joe Hingelberg get up, and he's like, oh, this is like a simple exercise. All you have to do is like the best scene. You just have to do a great scene. And can I get a suggestion? Someone goes,
a great
race.
Suggestion. Race?
Yeah, race, like a foot race. So me and Joe do a scene, and Hingelberg's great to work with. He's one of the most incredible improvisers I've ever met. So I felt good. I'm like, oh, I'm going to do a scene with Joe. This is easy, just follow his lead. It's going to be good. And we do a scene, and it had an arc. It was fine. And TJ's like, oh, hey man, good scene. It was good. But what was it great? I don't think so. Do it again. Make it great. And he didn't give us a note. He just make it great. So
make it great.
Again. We do the scene again. And, I heightened some things, start playing with it. And like, okay, that was good, not great. Make it great. We do it again. And he's like, that was pretty great. You know what? It's passable. But let me ask the people on the wall. So he starts walking up to people, and when TJ asks you a question, he has a way of pulling out the truth. Like, did you really think that was great? And then, I think first person says yes, second person says no. He's like, well, it wasn't great. Do it again. And I'm like, okay. So we do it again. And we kept on, and after we kept on doing it, and like, and changing things, and like I'm using every improv trick, but he would every time he was like, okay, that's okay, that was different, or that was better, or after it he would side comment, but he wouldn't really offer anything up, and then he would just go down the wall, and then everybody would say yay or nay, and the first person, and as soon as one person said nay, we'd have to do it again, like make it better, like make it honest, do something, and he wouldn't. And me and Joe must have done that scene. I'm trying not to overestimate, but at least 25 times.
Really? No way.
I asked Joe. There was actually one point, like halfway through, that almost everybody said yes, and then the last guy said no. And he and comedically speaking, like if I was going to write a scene, that would be it. But I was like upset. It was like I went through this emotional roller coaster. Like how do I figure out this puzzle and stuff like that? It wasn't a nope. It was like, I don't know, something about doing that it's draining. It's incredible. But when we finally got everybody on the wall to agree, like it was a great scene. It was incredible. It was the best feeling ever. One of the best feelings ever. I think what I learned about that exercise is how much work it really takes to make a good scene or a great scene. Because I think sometimes we do rest on our laurels and only put up a good scene when we could have put up a great scene. Sometimes we do rest on all our little tricks that we learn along the way. Sometimes we do that. Like respect what you're doing when you're on stage, I think is what I learned from that.
Yeah. I mean, also how difficult is it to pressure yourself to please everybody?
But what about you? Anything?
Yeah, I guess the only last thing that came to mind along these lines is Rachel Mason in Chicago. I took a workshop. Well, it was her and Susan Messing splitting a 3-day workshop intensive. It was great, man.
Wow, that's awesome. That what a 1-2 punch there.
Yeah, and there's so many things I took away from it, but one of the little nuggets, because we could probably have a whole another conversation about some of the stuff that I pulled from, especially, I mean, they're both so great, but Rachel, I really identified with the way that she communicated a lot of her ideas. I think she's more cerebral, where Susan is more a gut player.
I was thinking like they're a great representation of ours. Like not that either one of us are Susan Messing, but I can see how one would be more appealing to the other person. Like
totally,
because yeah.
But so on one of the sessions with Rachel, we were doing an invocation, which is a pretty common Herald opener, and I want to say what she did was she like set up that like, okay, we're going to do this. And there's a pretty common mistake that happens. And if it comes up, I'll point it out. And, in an invocation, you start by, you get a suggestion of an object and you start by describing it. And there's layers that you go through, but the first part is to describe it. And she gave that heads up that like, if we have this common pitfall, I'll stop and point it out. And I felt like everyone was nervous, and that made me nervous too. But I was like, I'm going to be brave and be willing to be the first one to go, and I'm just gonna go for it. And so it was like Christmas tree, and I started describing it. Doesn't really matter what it was. There's probably a valuable note in the invocation somewhere in there. But the more important thing is, I described the first piece of description for it. And Rachel goes, that's great. Typically the pitfall is to do it in this way. And what I like about what you did is that you did this. And I went, whew, as a kind of a joke. And she goes,
Right.
and now you're fired because you didn't believe in yourself.
Ah, that's awesome.
Or maybe it was, and now you're fired because you doubted yourself. And I was like,
That's
you know what I mean? It just, and that really stuck with me for like, it's just like this little thing of like, commit to what you're doing and don't let yourself get psyched out by expectation or instruction. Just trust yourself to do what you're going to do and be okay if you make a common pitfall or not. It shouldn't make a difference in your belief in how you go about the thing you're about to do.
Yeah. One last note. I mean, maybe like, you know what? If we ever do this again, or if this ever comes up again, I would like to just kind of go through notes because, like, yeah, I've taken those workshops. Like, God, anything Messing says is a great note.
Yeah.
So that alone should probably be an episode, or maybe we'll sprinkle it along the way.
Yeah.
But one note I give a lot that's not an improv note, and it's usually one I give for people who are doing their first showdown, or after like a class show, is just say thank you when people give you a compliment.
Yeah.
Like, just thank them. Don't explain what was wrong. Don't act, I know like your gut reaction is to be, oh, thank you, but it's no big deal. Like, just say thank you and accept it, because when someone's trying to give you a compliment, don't punish them for it. Just thank them,
Yeah,
and PJ taught me that.
Sure.
We all have. Yeah. We all have. PJ taught me that. And I, I've talked to our friend RJ Cash. He's another one he had to give that talk to, and I can see why both me and RJ are very similar in that way. Like, whatever, man. It was no big deal. Like, if someone paid for a ticket and gives you a compliment, accept it and just be thankful and accept the compliment. Yeah. And honestly, I do that in my real life now. Like, and it's been awesome. Like, it's a really great way to react, because I think it's I don't know, some kind of something a learned behavior.
Yeah, and it's tied to your self-esteem, and it's tied to acknowledging other people's perspective and not being self-centered. It's like a courteous exchange, and also letting yourself feel a kind word.
Yeah.
Or even if you felt like you were off.
Yeah, enjoy the moment. Yeah. Like, you have a job of entertaining that person. That person comes up to you and says, "Hey, good job, you entertained me." Accept that, thank them, and go out at your business, man.
Yeah. Well, maybe let's see how much we can keep the momentum going with these notes, because now I got a couple more. I think this is a Craig Kakowski thing, which is choose to know. And it's kind of like it's just such a simple rule that can be so effective if you find yourself stagnating in scenes, or in scenes that don't go anywhere. Is that choose from your character's perspective to know. It's also a nice way to substitute the rule of don't ask questions, is to just choose to know. Let your character know things, know how to do things, be an expert on, maybe not an expert, but like know about subjects, and choose to know your partner, have an assumed history with your partner. It's very, very applicable in a very boiled down, neat slogan, kind of like yes and choose to know. And I think it's actually something that I know you have used is as an exercise, which is, instead of doing the yes and method, you say, I know because.
Because.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And that's nice. I like that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's ride this train. Okay. Here's one I just thought of, and honestly, it really helped my philosophy as a student. I had this really great instructor. Her name is Jenny Hagel. She was on Second City main stage when I was training. Second City Detroit main stage.
Oh yeah,
I think she's a writer in New York now. I think she does a lot of stuff for like Conan maybe.
Seth Meyers.
Seth Meyers.
Yeah.
Names. Oh. But yeah, she was one of my favorite teachers because she just had this really cool energy. And she was just awesome. And she's actually who I needed during that time of my training, because she used to do this thing when I would perform and just keep on repeating, best day ever, best idea ever. Oh my God, yes, best ever. Because I think, like many other students coming up, we have a tendency to be negative in a scene, while we're trying to create conflict.
Yeah.
So someone would offer something up, and I would honestly poke holes in the reality, and like, oh no, like, hey, let's like, for example, hey, let's invent a hoverboard, or let's take our, better yet, hey, let's take the hoverboard to work. And I was like, no, those aren't even invented yet. Oh, that's horrible. That, you break your neck.
Yeah.
And she would be like, or it's the best day ever. And then I'd have to switch my last sentence to like, yeah, let's take the hoverboard. Like, let's do this. And then it would force me to try to figure out how we are riding hoverboards and getting to work, and then and help me to pick the more interesting choice and accept it and embrace it, Yeah. And embrace this interesting choice that someone else has made. It helped me to accept or yes, and then it,
Yeah. Did you take that switch committee workshop? I think they've been to Diff a couple times. I don't know how many times they've taught a workshop, but they're a kind of fast-paced Chicago-style troupe that does a lot of like transformative stuff and like
yeah, I know who they are. I haven't taken their workshop, but I know who they are. They're wonderful.
Yeah, they have an exercise called the buddy system, which is just like a mirroring exercise. But they get like 5 people, and it's like there's be like somebody's gonna push a point of view at the beginning, and everybody's gonna compound it. And so if it's like I hate my job or whatever, instead of somebody being like, oh, why? Don't leave or whatever, is just to be like, yeah, this job sucks. And then like, and then for the third person to be like, you guys talking about how much you hate this job, man, I could vent. And you know what I mean? And it's this buddy.
No, I like that.
They call it the buddy system, but it's more of like a group mind, group mirroring exercise. And just the option to adopt and mirror somebody else's thing is a really nice option, especially in group scenes where I think that like it gets very tricky very fast when people are like, okay, those two are on the same page, I'll be on another page. Just to remind yourself that you have the option to add to it, to just keep adding to the same perspective. And if you do that, even if it's something negative, like I hate my job, it puts you in agreement with each other. And it's a you versus the world kind of thing, right? Is that like you can still have a lot to work with without it turning to conflict between the characters.
That's awesome. I like that. Okay, so that kind of reminds me of a note that D'Angelo used to give, and it's basically like it's a note. There was a little debate there. When you are pimped into doing some kind of skill, do it to the best of your character's ability and just do it.
Yeah.
So by doing so, that eliminates the conflict of, hey, do that dance you always do. And so apparently in this world that we just created, my character does a dance he always does. So just dance rather than like, no, man, I'm not going to dance today. So that's not an interesting scene because either you are or you aren't,
Yeah.
So,
and if you're going to dance, the dance, right? Like,
yeah. So you basically set up the scene. So as soon as this guy dances, scene's over. So going back to what we do, don't open that door. Well, now we know. As soon as I open the door, scene's over. And also what it does is stops that thing from people trying to do stuff bad on purpose.
Yes, exactly.
And which is annoying. I always my favorite metaphor for that is like people who Uh, God, there's that movie Wedding Crashers, and they have that moment where they're dancing, and there's that band that's famous for like swearing or taking love songs or rock ballads and like swearing in it. So like there's that turnaround song,
Oh, yeah,
and I
yeah,
need you more tonight, but he swears during it, and it's hilarious. And people used to do that, but then like do it bad and like try to like, and the first time someone did it, I'm sure they got a laugh, but if you do it every week, it's not funny, and it's just like,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
honestly, like it's not that funny when you do it the first time. It may be funny for like 30 seconds, but after a while, like no one wants to hear 3 minutes of you doing something poorly and annoying on purpose. You know, you're
Yeah.
just antagonizing.
There's more bravery in it, right? There's more bravery
Right.
in vulnerability in
Yes.
trying to do something good on purpose as opposed to doing it poorly on purpose. Um,
Yeah, that's
even if
way
it
clearer
ends
of
up
an
being
explanation.
bad. Yeah. Well, and again,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
one thing that I'm guilty of. And when we talked recently about like my mischief maker side, and sometimes if I know what I'm supposed to do, I'll try to be a curveball. And yeah, sometimes it works. Sometimes it's really funny. And I think it's fine. But like you said, it's like it's a dangerous habit to be in all the time because I feel like I get into sometimes it's out of a place of ego protection and not
Yes.
out of a place of mischief and playfulness. So, yeah, it's good to train yourself to be willing to go for it.
Yeah. Oh, it's like Napoleon Dynamite when he does that dance. It's not a good dance, but my man is going for it.
Yeah.
It's an iconic moment in that movie. Like it's great.
Yeah.
And it's long, but it's entertaining.
Yeah.
You know.
Speaking of D'Angelo notes, another one that came to mind is he likes to say, find the pattern, play the pattern, break the pattern.
Yeah.
Because like you said, if we know the scene is over when X happens, sometimes you can only get so much mileage out of, even if you have a game playing through it, and then eventually you're gonna have to deviate from it, and that can be the surprise twist. But that's also like a kind of like spice move, because again, if you break the pattern too early or immediately, break the expectation.
Right.
It can be a swing and a hit or a swing and a fucking miss. And
It's true.
if it's out of habit, it might be out of ego protection. So
Yeah.
Be careful with it. But I do like the idea of like when you find the pattern, there's discovery in that. And when you play the pattern, there's surprise in doing that cooperatively as improvisers on stage. That's a joy for people to watch. It's impressive, surprising to get on the same page like that. And then when you break the pattern, it's again that it's what you were saying about the TJ. Was that scene great? And everybody goes on the line is like, yes, yes, yes. And it's this built up anticipation. And the last person goes, no. Yeah. And you said if you were going to write that scene, that's how it would go. And yeah,
exactly.
Sometimes that's what you need.
Yeah, you think about the rule of three. Sometimes the third one is the same pattern, just heightened.
Yeah.
Or sometimes you're breaking the pattern on the third one, or you do the third one and you break the pattern the fourth time.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that depends on the speed of the game, how much you heighten it by the time you got in there, like all those little, factors.
Yeah.
It's important. Cool. Which you're talking about ego reminded me of Jill Bernard. Because she definitely plays without ego, and she's awesome to watch, and probably one of the most supportive teachers or instructors anybody's ever had. She's just pure joy. But she does have that exercise dummy ball or idiot ball. I can't remember names. Where the whole thing is you circle up, and everybody's tossing a ball to each other, like, and the point of it is to not catch it and fail horribly at not catching it, and discovering the fun of trying to do something and it's okay to fail because it's still entertaining, and fail big, And and it's fun to watch how at the beginning of the exercise, people are just doing like, oh, like just barely missing the ball until they like you get like a couple minutes into the game, people are falling, people are throwing themselves. Like it itself, failing becomes the game, and it's such a fun game to play.
Yeah.
And you can't play that game if you have an ego and put that first, because someone with a big ego has to catch the ball.
Yes.
As soon as you catch the ball, you're not playing the game.
It's funny. Because it's almost like these two kind of opposing things that need balance, which is a willingness to fail and a willingness to try to succeed. Because
Right.
what we're saying with the D'Angelo note is that like, go for it. Actually try to rap or to improvise poetry or to dance or whatever. But then on the Joe Bernard side, where it's like, embrace failure, fail big. Don't actually try to catch the ball. Instead, fail big. And you got it's like one of the notes that I will give with warm-ups, because I like to do a lot of things that are inherently either impossible or very, very difficult with warm-ups. And the thing that I'll remind people is that like, we're not going to walk out of here as better people if we nail zip, zap, zop. So don't put too much investment in the success of it. It's just to give us something to focus on together. And the really exciting emotions that come out of it are going to be from being so invested that you're in flow. And success or failure, it's a great experience to engage and try.
Okay. If we're talking about notes we give, and maybe the one I give, probably, I don't want to say the most, but one of the ones I love to give, I guess, because it means a lot to me, is don't stop doing the thing. Because to talk, I hate that. Like, if you set up all this beautiful object work, don't stop doing the thing. If you get pimped into dancing, don't do a little dance and then stop to deliver your dialogue. Dance while you're delivering your dialogue. Don't stop doing the thing.
Yeah.
Because we talk a lot about like. We talk a lot about what words to choose and when to choose them, but we got to really respect the fact that it's also a visual art. And if we're doing plays that never been written, we have to pretend like they've been blocked as well. Because when you're rehearsing for a play, they are being blocked.
Yeah.
If you go to see a Shakespearean play and everybody just stands there with their hands at their sides and do a talking head Romeo and Juliet, it's not as good as when it's really being performed using the physicality of the characters and, using the stage and the landscape to increase the visual interest of the story.
Yes. Yeah.
So do the thing.
Yeah. Okay. And that reminds me of two theater notes from that I probably picked up like in high school, which is move with a purpose and push through the line. Like, just try to give clean, intentional delivery and give clean, intentional movement. And if nothing else, that's a good thing to condition yourself to. And like you said, don't stop doing the thing, because especially when we're improvising, it feels like two separate tasks that we're trying to create and keep in play, the physical aspect and the verbal aspect. But you need to condition yourself to do both if you're going to be able to really free yourself up from thinking about either. You just have to build the muscle memory and the comfortability with it. So move with a purpose and deliver your lines, push through the line with intention. It's a really good thing to practice. It doesn't always have to be the way in improv or theater, because there's lots of fun to be had with false starting and being nervous and stammering and talking over each other and getting messy. But it's a good thing to be able to do, to move with a purpose, speak with intention.
Right. Well, it's almost also taking that note, like, I know because, or like
Yeah.
acceptance. Because if you're moving it, do it because you're doing it, and you know why.
Yeah.
I'm walking across the living room into the kitchen to get a glass of water. I know my purpose. I'm walking with it. You know.
Yeah. Totally.
I like that.
Well, unless you got anything else, I think that might be a good place to hang it up.
Hang it up. Pick it up.
Yeah.
No, I think. I think those are great.
Yeah.
Like Gary did tell us about the learning curve, so I don't want to give too much in the middle.
Right. Yeah.
That was a lot.
Yeah. Great. Well, I'm glad because we thought about that question and we were like, well, if we each have like one or two things, that'll probably be a good amount to just offer up. But I feel like that was a nice domino effect of really valuable notes. And some of which I was getting from you for the first time. So that's cool.
Right. Well, I mean, and students, think about it this way. Think about all the things we just didn't remember, and it just came to us right now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when you get a note, I think the intention from the note giver is to help you create a good habit. So take the note.
Yeah.
Just because it wasn't delivered mean or, they're doing it because they care. So going back to the note of always just saying thank you, the best way to say thank you is to really consider it. And hey, sometimes the note you're given doesn't fit for you. Yeah. And that's okay because no one can really tell you how to have your comedic voice. That's for you to develop.
Yeah.
So taking the note, respect that the person giving it to you is doing it because they want to help or they see something, that you might not see about yourself. Take it in, think about it. If you can apply it, great. Use it and develop it and make it part of you if you can, or take just part of the notes, or whatever part of the philosophy speaks to you and adapt it. And honestly, you'll sit down 10 years later and think about why did I start doing that? And you might remember that moment.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, it's not like a voice in your head telling you, here's a checklist of things you need to do in the scene. It just becomes a habit.
Yeah. Give it honest consideration, and that's enough.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, this has been a great talk. And thanks to Ainsley and Kurt for the suggested questions. If you would like to send us your suggestions of questions and topics, you can send us that at improvfaq@gmail.com. And we are also on social media, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, at improvfaq. You can comment and engage with us there. We would love to hear your questions. As we have said before, we want this to be a community resource, and that definitely involves students and developing improvisers or improvisers of all levels to just get involved and let us know what kind of questions are burning on your mind.
Also, let's keep the conversation going. Are there any notes that you ever received that you want to share? Because let's learn by committee.
Yeah.
Like share them, People give you knowledge, spread it.
Absolutely.
That's how that's how we learn.
And until the next time, thanks for tuning into Improv FAQ at length. Bye.
Bye.